Hey guys, and welcome to a new guide for Demonology. I want to say that before we start, making a guide for each spec is not easy, and you should only use this as current guidelines. The state of playstyle, gemming, reforging may change on a weekly basis, so don't use this as your bible. The main issue with determining what's best right now is caused by a few factors. Our tools to determine our stats weights and crunch the math for what's the best DPS is mainly based around purely single target fights, or multiple targets staying alive for the exact same time. Therefore, we need to use our tools and add some common sense to the process. Despite this, Demonology is most likely our strongest spec right now, both on single target, multiple target and heavy AoE fights. Here's some ideas on how I go about playing Demonology right now. There's currently two playstyles for Demonology in Throne of Thunder. One I would call the standard Ghost Service, where you have a Felguard. The other one currently rising is Ghostsack with stacking haste. Now the main difference from the two specs are quite simple. Ghostsack started rising up due to the Lifedrainer trinket, simply because with the Lifedrainer trinket we have a lot more imps than ever before. Ghostsack buffs your imp damage and single target damage spells, and since imps are already the majority of your damage even as Ghost Service, this spec naturally becomes good. The differences of the two specs are not major, so you need to look at what fight each version is better. In general, the Ghost Service spec is good for lower item level or when fights have a short period of burst AoE, especially if your Felguard Fellstorm can shine like on Lifedrainer. You don't want to go for haste in fast AoE burst scenarios either, because you need to do high damage in a short period of time. Ghostsack is a good single target and multi-target talent, where targets survive for a longer period of time. The spec really shines as soon as you can roll 100% crit dooms on multiple targets. A perfect example of this is Council of Elders. You can pretty much play both styles on most fights. The better gear you have, the better Ghostsack should get, and it's really pointless to play Ghostsack without the Lifedrainer trinket in my opinion, while you could still play Ghost Service without it. Let's return to when either talent is used later on. Now let's take a look at glyphs. There has been a lot of debate about Glyph of Everlasting Affliction, and in theory it's a DPS increase with Lifedrainer trinket. It increases our doom duration by 50%, so we can roll an even longer 100% crit doom and get more wild imps. It helps us rely a little less on RNG with getting Lifedrainer trinket procs at the correct times, but it also caps the best RNG you can have of your life. It decreases our damage of doom and corruption by 20%. The more targets you can keep rolling 100% crit dooms on, the better this glyph becomes as well. It's 100% mandatory on any fights like Council of Elders. We also want to take Imp Swarm glyph. Without this glyph, Demonology produces a wild imp every X seconds depending on your haste. With Glyph of Imp Swarm, you can deactivate this effect and summon 5 imps instantly. It works very well for burst and the opener. You can line up your Imp Swarm with Dark Soul, and you want to keep doing that at all times. When Imp Swarm is off cooldown, you can still generate an imp like normally, but the duration between imps is increased by 4 seconds passively. Not using Imp Swarm on cooldown is doable while still gaining imps until Dark Soul is ready, but let's go into more about that later under the playstyle section. Now let's move on to stat priorities. This part is close to impossible to justify, but in general haste has become insanely good for Warlocks because it scales up your legendary meta gem. Our PPM trinket is from Throne of Thunder, and it also scales well with pets. Every spec haste has become far more valuable than before. Let's try to put up some rough guidelines to help out. Haste and mastery is your main priority as Demonology. Don't bother with crit at all. Now the question is how much haste you want. Well, there are a few notable areas of haste plateaus you want to reach for a certain item level. There's two versions too, because Glyph of Everlasting Affliction changes the duration of doom and haste plateaus. Now going for haste cap has become less important, but when haste scales as it does and is good regardless haste caps, it becomes natural to move towards the next level of haste and stacking mastery for the remaining stat. With Glyph of Everlasting Affliction, as soon as possible you want to go for around 8094 haste cap. The cap gives you an extra tick of doom with Everlasting Affliction glyph and another tick of Shadow Flame at 8064 haste. Now this is the first cap you really want to reach as soon as possible. Now there is a noteworthy value, but there isn't much point to go for these caps before the best in slot values. So unless you're getting close to best in slot, I don't recommend you to go above 8100 haste. At 14840 haste you get another tick of doom with only raid haste, and at 14873 haste you get another Shadow Flame tick. Best in slot profiles runs around 14982 haste or 42% raid buffed haste. Lining up Dark Soul with your wild imps start being optimized around the start of 14000 13,153 haste. This is calculated by a guy named Gul'dan working on Simcraft profiles. So once you come closer to best in slot gear, you want to shift towards these values. What it does is it tries to optimize the downtime between having imps swarm off cooldown before the next Dark Soul is ready. It tries to give you the best output of passive imps from demonic calling. Without Glyph of Everlasting Affliction, you got some guidelines too. The 8097 haste cap gives you another tick of doom with rate haste. Next up is the 13,153 haste cap, which gives you an extra tick of doom as well. Now as you can see, 8100 haste is around a good value you want to go for at mid-tier item level, while stacking rest of your stats into mastery. But remember to use these as rough guidelines for ideas how to handle your Warlock. You don't want to go full haste on a fast AoE fight like Lei Shen. So that's the situation where you want to stack mastery and possibly aim towards the 8100 haste caps, giving you a good balance of both stats. The key how to use your stats is by trying to figure out what those stats give you. Oftentimes the difference of reforging won't really be noticeable unless it's AoE fights. If targets stay alive for under a certain amount of time, mastery becomes better, while long-lasting targets with rolling dooms like Council of Elders and bats being kited on tortoise, haste can really shine. Watch out overusing Simcraft either. It's really hard to use with how the fights are built in Throne of Thunder. There's no pure single target fights with no damage boost gains for a short period of time, and there's only one encounter with long lasting targets like Council of Elders. That's why it's complicated to tell exactly what the best stat is, and you have to try to figure out how long the targets will stay alive and where you want your damage. If you want to min-max, you would have to reforge for pretty much every fight. That's why you want to use rough guidelines of stats to use that works well in most situations. Don't overthink the reforge and gemming too much. It's a minor DPS increase most of the time. Our PPM system has declined the value of small details a lot because it's all about getting lucky these days anyway. Let's look into gearing as a Warlock. It has changed a bit because we have Thunderforged item that has a higher item level than our set pieces. 4-piece tier 15 is not really worth it, but our 2-piece Demonology is quite strong in the opener. You want to look for 3 off pieces that are Thunderforged. It's most likely not worth to break 4-piece until you obtain at least 2 or 3 Thunderforged off pieces. I would suggest aiming towards getting the gloves from Duramune. They give you hit haste with 2 sockets, chest from Redan with hit haste and 3 sockets, and last you want the Redan mastery haste legs. Dark Animus headpiece is strong too with haste mastery, in case you get unlucky with the other pieces. That leaves you with shoulders and headpiece from our tire tokens as Demonology. Off pieces are mainly focused around the stats haste over mastery, and you don't really want to touch anything with crit. You want as little crit as possible, so don't bother with any crit items except the neck from Agera. There's random hit haste necklace, but the chances you will see it Thunderforge is close to nothing. Offset you want braces from Agera with haste or mastery, cloak from Redan or the legendary questline cloak coming soon. Rings from Ironcon and Redan, alternative to Ironcon ring is the one from Jinrock. Waist from Jikun with haste and hit. And boots are debatable, but for Demonology right now, take the Ironcon with hit haste, though the Redan's crit mastery has 2 sockets with 120 intellect bonus on them. Weapons you can go with Thunderforged Twin Staff, alternative is Dark Animus main hand with Lei Shen offhand. With the upgrade system coming soon, getting your hands on a staff would be faster way to upgrade your weapon with only 2 upgrades versus 4 from main hand and offhand. Now let's look at the dodgy topic, trinkets. This topic is being talked about pretty much everywhere, and it's really hard to tell the major difference of the trinkets. The playstyle changes a bit and the opener becomes better or worse with your trinket choices. We have 3 trinkets we can use to pair up with the Lei Shen trinket: Chai's, Breath and Beaujolais. Chai is good for swapping into meta and getting use of the 10-second burst window during the fight, but it works really bad in the opener because it fades too fast. Breath is good for the opener with a stable 20-second uptime and gives you good chance to burn your Fury when it procs again during the fight. Beaujolais seems to have a rather high uptime on most locks and seem like a really stable trinket too. It builds up your intellect, and sadly you can't really use the last proc to boost your Doom because we have it rolling with Lei Shen trinket. But you can stay in Metamorphosis during the whole build up duration, especially with your haste build where you spend more time in Metamorphosis overall. My 1 cent on this topic is that take whatever you can get your hands on. I'm personally leaning towards the Lei Shen trinket with Beaujolais or Breath over Chai, but that's also because I want to use those as Affliction and Destruction. I doubt you will see any major differences whatever you choose, as long as it's Thunderforged. And with the upgrade system we have to choose some trinket we want to use for most specs over 1 spec, so we can upgrade it as soon as possible. Now let's go over some fast basics before going into more detailed playstyle of Demonology. Demonology's power bar is Fury. You build up Fury by most of your spells and pet if you have one. Wild Imps generate Fury as well. These spells helps you get into Metamorphosis as much as possible and boost your damage according to your mastery. Demonology is about doing a large amount of damage inside Metamorphosis, and I would name your normal rotation outside Metamorphosis as our downtime. The spells as Demonology are mainly Dodge, Corruption and Doom, Hardcast as Shadow Ball and Soulfire, Instance a Hand of Gul'dan with 2 charges, Touch of Chaos which is Shadow Ball in Metamorphosis and Felflame. Pets / minions are Felguard, Wild Imps and Doomguard. Now the question is when to use what. You want to keep Corruption and Doom up all the time and never let it drop off. Hand of Gul'dan leaves a Shadow Flame dot which together with Wild Imps gives you a chance to get Molten Core procs. Molten Core proc decreases your Soulfire cast time. You don't want to use your Hand of Gul'dan back to back, you have 2 charges and the Shadow Flame dots stack. More about how to optimize that on the playstyle. Outside Metamorphosis you want to use your Molten Core procs casting Soulfire to build Fury. If you don't have any, then use Shadow Ball. Don't underestimate Felflame as Demonology, it does quite good damage, so don't be scared to use it if you have Maneuver's Fury instead of Kil'jaeden's Cunning and are moving. When you're inside Metamorphosis, your filler is Touch of Chaos. If you have Dark Soul up, you can Soulfire inside Metamorphosis, or if you have very high amounts of procs and a lot of Fury at once, it's most likely worth it to use Soulfire over Touch of Chaos. Dark Soul is used together with Wild Imps to boost their damage at all times. Now the key to Demonology is about the playstyle. Here's a few tips how to improve your play and decision making in Demonology. You want some general thumb rules to be successful with the spec. You need to track all your intellect procs and trinkets. You want to weave in and out of Metamorphosis every time they proc. You do not wish to cast outside Metamorphosis with any intellect procs up. Avoid to go out of Metamorphosis before your 10-second cooldown is back. You don't want Lyshin Trinket to proc while you have cooldown on Metamorphosis or other important intellect procs. If you are heavily Fury capped and have good procs, it can be worth it to Soulfire with Molten Core procs in Metamorphosis, especially if you're below 25% or you have legendary metagem proc. Especially because Touch of Chaos don't scale well with haste. Always use Molten Core procs if you have 2-piece tier 15 and Dark Soul up and the Fury allows it. Hand of Gul'dan Shadow Flame debuff stacks. If you hold 2 charges, you want to use the second charge so it overrides before your first Shadow Flame is about to expire, which results in 2 Shadow Flame debuffs stacked up. You can also go into Metamorphosis to buff the Shadow Flame damage right after you cast your second Hand of Gul'dan. Hand of Gul'dan's Shadow Flame doesn't calculate before it lands on the target, resulting in the option to go inside Metamorphosis to give your Shadow Flame the benefit from your damage boost. Using the Engineering Cobalt Frag Belt is a single target DPS game, but you can also use it inside Metamorphosis and it scales up the damage. It's really great for AoE scenarios. When Lyshin Trinket procs in the opener, you can use Doom twice so you get 3 more ticks of 100% crit because of Pandemic. If your Doom is about to fall off and your Trinket proc, same thing applies. Imp Swarm should always be lined up with Dark Soul. It's beneficial to save Imp Swarm and let Demonic Calling proc Imps until Dark Soul comes off cooldown again. Unless you gain enough haste procs to get an extra Imp Swarm before next Dark Soul. Let's take a look at AoE scenarios. Demonology's AoE is very strong and a few guidelines would be targets that last long enough, you always want to use Hand of Gul'dan to roll Shadow Flame debuff. The faster the target dies, the more appealing Chaos Wave becomes. Lyshin Ball of Lightning dies so fast that Chaos Wave shines. Immolation Aura is to be kept up as much as possible, and the spell you can fill your AoE rotation with is Void Ray or Hellfire out of form. If the targets stay alive long enough, you want to spread Corruption and Doom to get more imps. Void Rail will then renew the corruption on all the targets, but no fight in Throne of Thunder really allows this unless you solo AoE the bats on Tortoise. Now let's take a look at the openers. There's 2 openers, one with Ghosack and one with Ghost Service. Ghosack lacks Fury in the opener, and you won't have more than 1 or 2 Soulfires in Metamorphosis with Dark Soul up, while Ghost Service you can spam more Molten Core procs in the opener. I made a video about Demonology opener trying to explain what's important to look out for and how to burst. Main issue is that you won't always get Wild Imps with Metagem. I changed my macro a bit to make sure I always get meta on the imps. I basically excluded the Doomguard out and used it during Metamorphosis to be sure, so be sure to remember to use it. I also made a fast macro for Ghosack that I use. It seems like it's really hard to have to avoid casting Imp Swarm before or after you go into Metamorphosis, so this macro could still use a little work, but it works. Now let's take a look at which encounters make Demonology shine. Council of Elders, Duremu, Dark Enemies, Ironcorn, Twins of Concert and Lyshin really makes Demonology good. Ghosack's strongest encounters is Horadon, Council of Elders, Dark Enemies, Jikun and Tortoise if you don't kill the bats fast. Ghost Service strongest encounters is Lyshin and maybe a few other fights depending on how your guild handles it. But do note, most of the encounters is very close or nearly the same what you choose. It doesn't mean Ghosack or Ghost Service is bad on the encounters, both playstyles work pretty well on every single encounter. I will make more boss video guides and go deeper into what boss fight makes what Grimoire shine, so so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching and I hope you found it helpful.